Who reviews the reviewers? We do. This is Yesterzine, where we rejudge a magazine's best and worst rated games and dive deeper to find out what games coverage was like when we didn't all just find out about them on the internet. Magazines back then were the thought leaders, and Amiga power more than most. It was also the hard man of reviewing, once awarding a game 1%. We saw that 1% in episode 18, where we got near 15 of our mates to literally act out the Kickoff 96 review like it was a stage play. 2020 was a strange land. Amiga Power gave out a 2% as well, plus a bunch of 3s and 4s. That 2% and 2 of the 3% appear in this, issue 26 from June 1993. It's going to be one of those months. But first, of course, there's a gaming heaven, and it's from a short-lived developer that even fans of the genre might not know. And there's a cover feature, where a TV series that can't possibly become a game becomes a game. Twice. First though, we're on our summer holiday to Japan, via Italy. So let's start with explaining what the bloody hell I'm talking about, because today's gaming heaven is the point-and-click adventure Nippon Safe Sync, a game that the English language speaking chunk of this channel's viewership might not even remember, by Dynamite, who, likewise. Born partially out of the collapse of British publisher Mirasoft, Dynamite was formed ad hoc at a trade show by designer Christian Cantamessa, the father of one of his friends and a magazine journalist. They were there to shop round a short demo made by Christian and two former Mirasoft associates, which heavily relied on assets from a game Mirasoft never finished. In an effort to appear professional, they threw together a name and started claiming some pictures that Massimo Magnatucci had knocked up in deluxe paint were other titles their totally real and legit publisher had under active development. It was enough to fool CU Amiga, who published an article where they uncritically previewed all the titles, but not enough to fool anyone who might have given them any money. Ultimately, they went it alone, controversially losing founder member Christian along the way, and Nippon Safe Sync was eventually put together by the same number of people as it has playable characters. 3. The story is told in more detail by GenesisTemple.com, but I've seen the word count of this episode, so I'll simply direct you to the description for a link to it. It's quite a ride. For Nippon though, it still wasn't smooth sailing. As they approached launch in mid-1992, manuals and boxes printed, floppies ready to go, their publisher went under. Dynamite bit the bullet and published it themselves, in Italy only. The game had no marketing, because they couldn't afford it, and they were actually happy with the 1,000 or so domestic copies they sold. A year later, it got a UK release from Global Software, publishers of Tearaway Thomas. Or wait, was it DMI? Distributors of exactly nothing you've ever heard of. This rather confused Dynamite, because they never signed a deal with either party, nor ever saw any money for international sales. I still don't know how we really got it in the UK. None of the UK materials I can find have any logo beyond Dynamite's own, but get it we did, and I'm sure I played and liked this in the day. So let's see what 30 years have done to it. And it starts promisingly. An interactive introduction introduces our 3 playable characters, an idea famously used in Maniac Mansion and its even more famous sequel Day of the Tentacle, released fairly close to this in the UK. The intro takes the form of short playable sections involving the 3 playable characters, all leading up to them getting arrested for wildly different levels of crime. You've just seen Doug get arrested for trying to break into a bank, and the generic knucklehead Dino is then tricked into trying to steal a car. In the third and longest intro, you don't play as the third character Donna though, but as a random bloke, and it's here we can see that a combination of its age and translation, culturally and literally from Italian, might be problematic. The vendor is a pure racist caricature. So much so, it was only on my second run through this that I realised the extent to which they'd just substituted L for R in most of his speech. It's also quite an obtuse puzzle. You don't have money, so you have to barter the one thing you're carrying in order to get the tie required to enter the executive lady establishment. But the tie costs too much to do a direct swap. You have to trade for a rubber mouse, and then you can trade the mouse for the tie because he's just run out of mice and thus needs to buy more in. Weird. In the club, we're actually introduced to Donna, who is performing on stage, ultimately being arrested for performing her famous bottle dance, which, thanks to limited animation, looks exactly like her other dance. And thus our premise, as the intro itself plays, giving us a basic introduction to what I'm hoping is not the entire personality of our three characters, eventually categorising them as smart, sexy and sucker. Surprisingly good alliteration in a second language, that. I hope you're enjoying the music though, because it's about the only sound other than the odd spot SFX I encountered in my entire time in the game. So as is traditional on this channel, let's soundtrack it with Amiga legend Chris Hulsbeck. The first thing the main game asks for is a code. Technically, this isn't copy protection. It's the character select screen. In the manual is a personality quiz where you're supposed to answer to match the character you want to play, which is impressively obtuse given the little you currently know about them. If you're playing the Amiga version, and you should, check the video description and you'll find a working code for each character. We choose the Knucklehead to start. And first impressions are not great, because virtually none of what's about to happen is going to make sense. Let me take you through the story of how Dino gets and loses his museum gig. First, he gets recommended for the job from the prison governor he mistakenly thinks is a headmaster. Once there, his job is to unpack the priceless antiques that have been delivered straight to a random room upstairs for some reason. In order to open this room, we need to move the fire extinguisher out of the way, in order to expose the panel that itself obscures the controls for the lock. The game does at least have context hotspots, so if you can see something, you can do something. The answer to the code I brute forced. I still have no idea why this is the answer or what could possibly tell you that beyond there are 4 buttons with 2 states, so it doesn't take that long. This opens the door upstairs just long enough for you to get in there before it slams. In the storeroom, you can open and somehow pocket all but one of the priceless antiques, along with 2 of the paintings that were already on the wall. You can't yet do anything with the one that's in a Perspex box. The controls are fairly simple and look like an adventure game several years newer. This is good. But they act like they hate you and everything you stand for. This is bad. You would think, to use 2 items in your inventory together, you would just open the inventory, select one, select the other. But the inventory only opens when you hold the right mouse, and while you can select something and go back into the inventory, it does nothing. I'd give you time to think, but the answer is just weird. You need to select it in the inventory and then enter the inventory again while you're highlighting your character, and then it will mysteriously work. You won't see this though because it doesn't offer any feedback this has happened and closes the inventory again. Nothing we are holding allows us to interact with the box. The answer is to realise that one of the antiques is a can of soup, while another has a sharp edge, and to know who Popeye is. You eat the soup and become super strong, enough to break the Perspex box and retrieve the priceless lighter. Now to get out of the room. While it's not even been identified as an object before this point, your best bet is to use the smoke detector on the ceiling to set off the fire alarm. Now how to burn something. Well, if you've ever owned a lighter, you'll know they light, but apparently not this one. We need to use the alcohol thermometer on it in order to light it, then light one of the paintings, specifically obviously the Mona Lisa, which is the only one that'll work. You then need to specifically hold said painting near the ceiling to finish the job. Excellent work. Except for the destruction of the museum's entire collection. They've still got some stuff in the main hall though, and you're told to tidy the sarcophagi. It offers you no idea how to do this, but my first instinct is correct. I move them into height order, using the fact there's one more space than sarcophag. And it doesn't work. Because what I didn't anticipate is you need to have them in the right order, starting from the very first space, and leave the right-hand one empty. There is every chance that even if you think of this, you'd do what I did, ditch the idea and go searching for something remotely like a clue. The destruction of those finally gets us fired, mainly because presumably there's no museum left, and I'm already rather soured on this game sadly. A quick glance at a walkthrough also proves this game is short. There's maybe 10 paragraphs to finish Dino's story, and we've just experienced 2 of them. Granted, there's 3 characters and what I already know is a pretty short finale, but still. Nonetheless, let's give it a chance with another character. How about a date with Donna? Now, I have an advantage here because in reading the code, I also read the first 2 lines of the walkthrough, and it tells me I need to walk several screens down the highway when I leave prison and steal some mustard from this food stand, which is surprisingly tricky. It's so difficult to find the spot the mustard is on that I actually check I'm at the right food stand, and then check another walkthrough to be really sure. In the end, I accidentally highlight it briefly and then spend quite some time trying to find it again. You always worry when an item is easy to miss early in an adventure. If you remember Red Hell, an item you could miss in the first 5 minutes of the game is the solution to the penultimate puzzle. I'm distracted from this by an excellent bug though. Whenever you pass the prison again, and you have to do it at least twice to get out of this area, Donna walks out of it like she's being released again. There's no way this wasn't spotted, and it's only the presence of a much more obvious bug later in this episode that stops me mocking this for longer. Nonetheless, we get a lift into town by stealing a sign to wave, and visit our old place of employment, which is also the location for the plot. A strange man in the corner exploits Donna's deep and meaningful character depth of offering to sleep with literally everyone, to instead request she retrieves an antique sword from the local emperor thanks to his weakness for beautiful women. Is there no start to Donna's talents? More interestingly, the guys at the table below offer to pay Donna to get them 2 hot dogs with mustard. Mustard, you say? After a stop at the Emperor's Gaff to discover our way in is going to be to learn to make tea properly, we head into the park and find the hot dog vendor, who does indeed give a discount for a hot dog without mustard, earning us a cool 50 yen profit to go with our promised generous tip. Which leads me to test a theory. If you somehow remembered the food stand and wondered if it had mustard, can you get back? Amazingly, you can, by the same means of hailing lifts that got you out. Score 1 for Nippon SaveSync. But remove 1 point that the mechanism to get lifts apparently only works from one of the 8 screens cars pass you within. So again, you might well discount a correct puzzle solution through no fault of your own. The hot dog is an essential puzzle, it seems. While we only get another 50 yen as a tip, when we talk to a local geisha and discover she owns a tea house downtown, a ticket there costs exactly the 100 yen we've scraped together. So what happens if you just buy hot dogs with mustard in the first place? I had to find out. And it turns out he's out of mustard, so we accidentally pre-solved the puzzle there. And it's a good one, if they hadn't made the mustard so tedious to find. Assuming you'd discounted or never found that food stand, you'd think of the local shops and the club as possible sources for a start. And so we're in the same situation as with Dino. Nippon does at least seem to have avoided no-win states, and commendably, perhaps given LucasArts were massively more popular in Italy than Sierra, also doesn't appear to have sudden deaths. But its puzzles tend towards the silly, which is in itself okay. What kills you is the interface being so obtuse you can find yourself discounting correct puzzle solutions. Whether you want to lean on a walkthrough to finish what is actually quite a short game the wrong way is up to you. But so far, the 3 characters appear to have the collective character depth of an English reservoir in a heatwave. I see why I liked it as a kid, and I'm sure I didn't get that far in it. It's got a style, and graphically it's an equal with anything going, even if the sound is as low effort as a Labour Party pro-union statement. But unless you've played everything else, this is probably not a point and click to come to in 2022. It makes most of the classic mistakes and doesn't do enough with its story and characters to pull itself out of that hole. But don't listen to me because I've got good news. As of a few years ago, Nippon SaveSync is freeware, and it runs under popular adventure game interpreter ScummVM, which is available on everything. So go to ScummVM.org, download it, download the superior Amiga version, and maybe give a game that if nothing else tried to be interesting a fair chance. We're in one of those situations again, where I've got 2 things to explain and they could go in either order. So let's roll a dice. Okay, so British children of the 80s will know Knightmare. It was an innovative dungeon crawler game show of sorts. One kid put on a helmet that blocked their vision and ventured out into what was clearly a green screen the size of a small warehouse. Back in the control room, 3 friends directed them through CGI-generated dungeon rooms with the help of hero-to-a-generation Tregard, and occasionally battled by various dungeon denizens, some under the control of Nemesis Lord Fear. And it was not a show that went in for participation trophies. 1 sidestep left when you should have sidestepped right, 1 vital clue missed because you got an obscure riddle wrong, 1 item you should have picked up and you were insta-killed. And there was nothing for repair. Not in this game. And because it'll be useful later, here's a copyright-friendly 6 seconds of the theme tune. Remember it. Second important topic. Much later in life, Amiga Power would espouse a theory that the lowest mark you could give a game and not upset the PR people was 73%. In doing so, they essentially accused every other magazine that gave 73% to any game of some sort of shenanigans. This in turn is why they thought other magazines averaged 7 out of 10, whereas they of course did things properly. We will charitably ignore at this point only one of the 12 full price games reviewed in this issue scores below 50, and much more about that one later. If you're wondering if AP's claims had any merit, then this channel did a whole series on the concept, putting 73% reviews from the likes of the One Amiga, CVG and Sega Power on trial to see what we thought. I bring both these up because there is a Knightmare video game, and it's reviewed in this issue of Amiga Power. It gets, as I truly hope you've worked out by now, 73%. Amiga Power aren't on trial here though. This is a budget re-release of a game they gave 74% 18 months earlier, and while 74% is in the lower end of the scores the game's got, as was typical of Amiga Power, it certainly wasn't the lowest it attracted. Notably, a 63% from the ever-reliable Ian Osborne in Amiga Force. But that is why it caught my eye, and then it occurred to me, given what we know about Knightmare, how do you design a game? Do you play the control room? Do they quietly forget the helmet idea and just have you in a fully formed dungeon? Or do you try and do an entirely different thing and hope no one notices? You were never going to get the series' full cartoon introduction on an Amiga, unless the Dragon's Lair people were involved. But the theme tune is a very good attempt, predictably so, coming from industry legend Richard Joseph, who you may know from most of Sensible Software's output. There's another reason for optimism here too, the name Tim Charl in the design credits, the actual creator of Knightmare the TV show. The first clue it's not going to be entirely faithful is that it asks you to put together a party of 4, whose default names come from the surprisingly involved backstory in the manual, which I suspect might be where the work of Mr. Charl comes in. So say hello to Rat, James, Sean, and Dickon. Dick on. After a short pause to stop giggling, we head into the game, and it's a standard Amiga RPG. Outside. Admittedly, by this point in its history, Knightmare was making use of some outside locations, albeit still actually within the studio, but this doesn't look like Knightmare. Or play like it. I should confess, I've deliberately read no instructions here. We're not here to review this game as a game, but just as a Knightmare tie-in. So what I'm actually doing is wandering around aimlessly with the only clue that this is anything other than generic the RPG being a couple of portraits of Tregar's face. What also doesn't help is the game penalises you with damage for walking into walls, and that always seems to happen a step earlier than I think it should. Worse, I later find out that this game does use some walls to hide secrets. I find a rideable cart, but it seems to go back and forth so quick I lose track of even which end I started at. It's like if someone turbocharged the Waterloo and City line. It's a really confusing initial game, and it seems this was deliberate. Even the manual tells you crap all apart from the basics. It does at least explain you're supposed to right-click the move forward icon to try pushing. If there's nothing to push, it moves forward. So why even have the distinction? I got the manual, presumably legally, because I downloaded it from Knightmare.com, the official site of the TV series. It's surprisingly honest. It quotes 4 reviews, none of which Amiga Power, and 3 of them basically say it's worthless as a TV adaptation, even if a couple of them liked it. They also, though, appear to recognise that telling the player nothing might have been a mistake. When the nearest thing your game has to an official site tells you an infinite life cheat and links to a full walkthrough prominently on its homepage, then probably they're trying to tell you something. That said, the link to allow you to play the game links to an entirely unrelated 1986 MSX shooter by Konami, so I'm going to guess Knightmare.com are taking a punt that a 10-year out-of-business video games company are probably not going to be taking a lot of legal action. If you want to search on the site they gave you, you can play this game. I'm not really sure why you would. There was another official option. 4 years earlier, Activision had a go for the 8-bit micros. I wonder how that did with the theme tune. Oh god! Wait, how do I make it stop? Pressing the start button just makes it start again! Where's the manual? Oh god, I think that noise is in my bones. Okay, so it turns out that to start this game you have to hold down the fire button. I fear that is about to be a preview of the general approach to user interface. What doesn't help is the controls appear to be backwards no matter what joystick I tell the emulator I'm using. This continues for some time until I eventually end up redefining the controls the wrong way round, which is going to come back to bite me when I inevitably forget next time I play a game. The interface itself is weird. In some ways it's actually ahead of its time. It's a verb list where you can step through or press the first letter. And while I never quite got the hang of it, I can see what they were trying to do, even if it does constantly give you options to choose objects that are either invalid or not anywhere near the room. Which results in me prancing around this cell for some time before I consult a walkthrough. So, you need to pick up the food, which is one of those objects lying around, and give both that and the water to the old man you're sharing a cell with. Despite the fact he could have picked up the food at any time anyway, he's so grateful he'll give you his magic spade so you can escape. Why he is not using the magic spade to escape is undefined. And so, in order to leave our cell, we open the door. Excellent security there. But then we get into a secondary cell from which we have to dig, and then we fall upwards into a corridor. Let's not look into that too closely. It's already clear as we run away from the guards, who are apparently incapable of pursuing us into the other half of the corridor they are literally standing in, that this is not a good game. But there is an argument to be made it at least vaguely resembles the show, which also had similar issues with its enemies' relationship to object permanence. Running into the one open door in the corridor, we get an appearance from another Knightmare staple, the wall monster, that asks incredibly obtuse trivia questions to 10-year-olds. This time, it also has the wrinkle it wants you to give the opposite answer. On the plus side, we then get a sword, although how you're supposed to know it's in this room I'm not especially sure. This enables you to bonk people on the head so they disappear, and then visit an executioner, who asks 3 incredibly obtuse trivia questions to 10-year-olds. And then a tiny bit later, a wall monster, who, well, you get the idea. I have a feeling this was hastily converted from another design. What's missing from Knightmare is a lot of the object interaction and puzzles. It's all running away in trivia. Bless it though, it's trying. At least I get a sense I'm vaguely in the show, but none of these are good games. We called in help, from the top source on all things Knightmare, the Temporal discussion podcasts. What do you think of these two?
My opinion of the two officially released Knightmare computer games is that they're both other games that had the Knightmare name thrown on at the last minute to increase sales. Now, the Amiga game is a moderately competent dungeon crawler which, aside from some character names, doesn't really have much to do with Knightmare. The Specky game, however, is a garbled, unfinished mess that should never have been released, with the most awful rendition of the theme tune ever.
Oh, we noticed, Martin.
The only remarkable thing about the Spectrum game is an early pixelised rendition of a topless woman, just what you'd expect in a game based on a kids' TV show. There's also the fact that one of your first tasks in the Amiga game is to find clothes, which suggests that Treguard is sending children into the dungeon naked.
Okay, so are there other options?
If you really want a Knightmare game that feels like a Knightmare game, your best bet is the decades-old fan-made Games Factory games by Paul Boland, which are available on the Knightmare.com website. I had a little fiddle with them, and I did manage to get them running quite well under Windows 10. I'm not sure about Windows 11, though.
I agree. The early ones of these rather cleverly used PowerPoint as their base, and they're simple but recognisably Knightmare-like things. Sadly, thanks to old floppy disks, they're not all available, but the ones that are linked in the description. I had more fun with them than either of the other two. And there's even one remaining option. Martin again.
Paul also created a game for Steam called Dungeoneer, which was basically Knightmare meets Dragon's Lair. Sadly, although Paul did have plans to make other games based on Knightmare, he passed away last year before he was able to put them into practice.
At the time of writing, Dungeoneer is merely £4 on Steam, and it's a chunky little thing clocking in at a full 5 GB. You see why though on launch. This is a heck of a lot more immersive immediately, and it's very sad to me that this will probably never see a VR release. Yeah, we're dispensing with the helmet, but that's pretty much a sacrifice you'd always have to make for a good single player game. The atmosphere is spot on though. I'm very deliberately only going to show the first 5 minutes, but this is going to be worth your time. The whole thing is constructed in a very 90s FMV game way. It reminds me very pleasantly of The Seventh Guest, and plays a lot like a point and click. It's a good combination. There probably isn't a really Knightmare game. I'm still not sure how you could, but this feels like a descendant of Knightmare, and I think that's all we can ask for. So the gaming hell, and we've got 3 games with a combined score of 8% to consider. Lucky, the decision on which to play is made for us rather. Generally, on YZ, we ignore re-releases, as they're not of the time of the magazine. One of our 3% is affected. American Football Sim 4th and Inches. Its sheer age and obscurity meant I can't actually find a single magazine that reviewed it on both release and re-release. But alongside the 3% from our current squeeze, Ian Osborne pops up again to give it 6. At the time, Amiga Force's lowest ever. And the other 2 members of the Classic 3 were also around for this re-release. The one giving it 20%, slightly lower than the score they would give a 6-hour line at the post office, and Amiga Action giving it 87%. Wait, what? Their review curiously missed the problems others experienced, apart from glossing over some serious compatibility woes with the supposedly supported A1200. We're not here to review either Amiga Action or this game though, so we back away slowly, which only lands us on the exact same reviewer giving the other Amiga Power 3% a full 65. That game, while a budget release, was a straight to budget release, so let's give it a quick go. And for the second time this episode, we're going to have to explain something really quite incredibly 80s British to our viewers, who are neither of those things. This is Ed the Duck. Ed is a character from the breaks between children's shows in the UK in the late 80s and early 90s. Although one look at him and I really didn't need to specify a time period, did I? That much radical dude can only have been contained within that 5-year period. And in a world where crapping everything got licensed, he got a couple of games. Albeit, the damning commentary on how much the license means to anyone is that it's a straight-to-budget release from straight-to-budget release specialist Zeppelin. And because we're still only just out of the 80s, then it's cartoon platformer time. I wasn't actually going to play this, but I've recently got this very shiny USB Competition Pro joystick, and this is the first chance I've had. But the first puzzle is how to start the game. I'm sure I'm missing something, but the only way I found to do it is to swap the mouse to port 2 and click, then quickly swap back before the game starts or you won't be able to control it. I'm going to assume that's a Pymega foible of some kind. The game itself we won't spend much time on, it's not good. But to be fair to it, it's not Count Duckula too bad at all. It looks okay. Ed does roughly what you want him to do, and the level design is okay, I played worse. I give it points for allowing both up and fire to be jump as well. Do what you like. It's unashamedly aimed at 90s 6-year-olds, and as a straight-to-budget, you know I'm not going to 3% it. But as a 42-year-old man who never much liked Ed the Duck, it's obviously not going to be my jam, and I've got any number of cartoony Master System platforms I should give a go instead. Amiga Power's review suggests they played it about as long as I did, not actually mentioning any special flaws in the game other than it being unimaginative. Add another 70 to that score and I'd want to have words. They also say it's the most awful game they've played in a long time, which is interesting, because it's not even the lowest score the reviewer concerned handed out this month. Which brings us to the real gaming hell, and its International Rugby Challenge. And what worries me here is while Amiga Action somehow managed to give the last two 80 and 65%, even they could only muster 39 for this. And they're a magazine that once famously said a game deserved 35% for successfully booting. What should also worry me is this isn't even included on the Amiga's very comprehensive selection, so we're going floppy powered on this one. Thankfully questions like external drives aren't going to come up, this just has the one disc. The Domark Champions of Sport label was a winner. You'll have seen it back in episode 1 of this show, because it gave the World Championship Manager, now simply Football Manager, one of the biggest sports titles there exists. Domark also gave us this well-regarded F1 title from a recent episode, but they mostly bought that in. The menu hates you. It's a juddery mess that does almost its entire job with pictures. It saves you translation, but it's not always obvious how to set up a simple game. But I do manage this, so we can have a go. It's okay, actually, at least at first, although the problem you discover when you lose the ball is it's not always obvious where it's gone. The basic mechanics of rugby are here though, understandably a harder sport to simulate than others, but it's certainly not inspiring. You quickly start to see the holes though. As well as that issue with seeing the ball, the game calls a try the second I cross the line. For those who don't know rugby, you get to do a kick for an extra point after a try, and it's from level with where you score. So a smart player with space will run the ball to the middle before putting it down. Can't do that here. And I have time to explain this to you because it takes a very long time to load both into and out of these kicks. The thing is, you can list as many faults as you like with this game, and indeed some benefits, but there's one that trumps them all. You will notice I'm ahead in this match with 30 seconds to go in the first half. Or is there? Let me pause the game for a bit. And unpause. And pause. And unpause. Did you notice it? The time skipped. While the game looks like it's paused and even the timer display stops, the timer does not stop. We're at the end of the half. You are probably now wondering what happens if I start the second half and just pause. Let's try. You can imagine yourself what I might be doing. A comfort break perhaps. Writing an entire review of Ed the Duck 2 for Amiga Power maybe. Watching all the good bits from Police Academy 7. But do you think I'm also winning a rugby match that's frozen on my screen? Can a leading publisher really be dumb enough to release a game in this state? In your heart, you know the answer. To be fair, it's not technically a game-breaking bug, unless it works in 2-player of course, and then given that pause is on the keyboard, it would quickly change from a rugby game to more of a one-on-one fighter. It could, I guess, still be described as a scrum. 2% though? Well, you could argue that a flaw the size of that timer is a killer, but 2% really should be a game that doesn't work. Like Rise of the Robots. Like Dangerous Streets. Amiga Power got themselves into some trouble for this one, comparing a list of things including actual wars favourably to the game. So maybe a certain reviewer you all know had that idea and was looking for a game to use it on. Silly concept review aside though, 2%, 20%, even 50%, it doesn't really matter. International Rugby Challenge doesn't deserve to be remembered. There are at least 2 better rugby games on the system. One of them was released by Domark 18 months earlier. Maybe play that. On the back page, and accompanied by a huge tip of the hat for the lend of their expertise, is the Temporal discussion podcast, devoted to all things Knightmare, including an episode-by-episode journey through the legendary series. Welcome, listeners of Illusion, to the podcast which dispels confusion. And if you didn't know that to do that, you'd be saying NOISUFNOC, then you're going to need to tune in. Join them for humorous observations, behind-the-scenes talk, and a breakdown of the series done in a way that only those with a true love of the source material can manage. After all, it's only a podcast, isn't it? And join us next month for another magazine, at least another 2 games, and exactly 1 your mum joke, because wherever you phase through time, some things are big enough to be ever present. Bet you thought I'd forgotten this month, didn't you? Bye bye.